Hello and welcome to another Nerd Rant, which of course should be called Nerd Ramblings. Today it's summer in Germany. It's damn hot. It's too hot to do anything. And basically that's why we decided to just get ourselves a Midjourney account, dabble our feet or ankles into it, and talk a bit about AI, the recent developments, and our perspective on what it means for the industry, what it means for
Us.
I was about to say humanity,
For
but maybe not.
the university. I think it's time to talk about it because, of course, it's been a while. AI is everywhere. Everybody's talking about AI. But recently we start to see the results because now everybody can just use it because Midjourney, for example, has a public beta program where you can join, and that means that Twitter is full of AI generated imagery.
And not only due to Midjourney, but let's also mention the competition, which in my opinion currently is a bit more intriguing because maybe it's more secretive and maybe harder to get in, such as Dall-E or Google's Imagen.
Absolutely, and we talked about Dall-E already, I think, in the past.
Might be. Yeah.
It is. We took Midjourney as an example just because you happen to have an account, and that means we can just use it and try it out. But be it Midjourney, be it Dall-E, after the developments by NVIDIA some years back where you could paint in an image and then it filled in the photorealistic texture, which got our minds blown back in the day. Now we have something that creates images just from description, from text.
Yeah.
And this is a very interesting development and people are going nuts over it. And if you put just Midjourney into Twitter, you can see that you get a feed of millions of images. People are really loving it. And I think they are using the GPU farms by Midjourney quite a bit to generate content and even more content.
And I think that's why Midjourney also presses you into their subscription models really quickly.
I can understand why they do this because, of course, it will be expensive to provide all this computation power.
Absolutely.
And the images you see here are interesting, to say the least, because they are created in a way that was not possible before, and they are the output of a very, very complicated function that was created through deep learning. And I think it is important to talk about them because even if they are looking quite familiar at the moment, I think if you scroll through a feed like this and don't look too closely, you have just the impression as if you are scrolling through any medium of digital art that is online, like ArtStation or Instagram or whatever.
Is that an advantage or a disadvantage, you think?
I'm not sure yet. It's just I'm just recognizing that that the images look very familiar. And if you think about it, not that I'm a lot into the intricate details of how the algorithm works, but it is all based on learning data from public sources. So, of course, all the biases and the styles and the design decisions of all these public sources go into the data set that feeds these images. So it's no wonder that we see familiar light distribution, familiar color palettes, familiar shapes. I don't know. But at the same time, there is something strange to these images, and I'm not entirely sure what exactly it is. Like, look at this. What is this? A cat?
Yeah, a cat thing.
Like a light stroke exposure cat or so?
Painting, yeah, something like that, yeah.
No, that one. I mean, a lot of people on Twitter do not bother telling us about the prompt they're using. Maybe we first introduce you to Midjourney and how it is working if you do not know what exactly this is. So it works through Discord as an interface.
Which is a weird decision, but I mean, it works. In the end, it's a bot that you drive through.
So you can go to Midjourney, and if you have an account, you can look at this community feed. And once you got accepted into the beta, you end up on Discord.
Right.
And on Discord, they coded a Discord bot, a custom bot that understands your commands. And let me just show you. If I now on Discord just tell Midjourney to do something by putting in a slash and then imagine. Now Midjourney recognizes this as a command and asks me for a prompt, and that is a text describing the image. So if I say VW Beetle in front of, I don't know, store, Matisse style, something like this. Let's see what we get. Now you put this in, and now it is trying to put this onto the GPU farm and computing it, and you get status 3% done, and sooner or later you get some images of a VW Beetle, hopefully in front of a store. And once these images are created, you can then invoke further actions, like either creating variations or upscaling one of these images. Now that is interesting. That is interesting. I'm missing the store though.
Yeah, the store isn't there yet. Let's see how it converges and where it converges to, because also it's quite interesting to see the difference between the first iteration of the first blurry images and then the details it slowly hallucinates on top of these.
Yeah.
So let's wait for this to finish, because after those iterations have finished, Midjourney will present you with this weird button bar down here, consisting mainly of U's and V's and the ability to rerun your prompt. And the U's are there to upscale one of those images that Midjourney proposes to you, and the V's are to generate variations based on one of these images. So I'd say let's create a variation of one of these.
Which one do you prefer?
I prefer either V2 or V4, so that's the yellow or the orange one.
Let's go with the yellow one. It looks so sad.
V2.
V2. So you press the V2 button and Midjourney starts over, generating variations.
Yep.
And using this one as a basis. And you can see now we get 4 yellow beetles. And that is how you create images with Midjourney. And I think it is very interesting because think about it. While working in an agency environment or a studio environment, that is exactly what you do if you are working with a team. If you say are the lead artist of a team or so, you are communicating with your team of artists through speech. You try to describe what you want to see, and these artists then start to create the images for you. Then you will give creative feedback and maybe have remarks, create variations until you end up at the result that you imagined in the first place. So this interface that Midjourney is mimicking is very much the interface that we are using for years. We are not at the machine. But then again, it is very different because everything is just created by a machine and not by people.
Exactly. So one interesting aspect here, or to me, one of the more interesting aspects when it comes to communicating with Midjourney, or using Midjourney, maybe that's a more appropriate word, is that when you're working with a team of artists, you kind of select them. You know their portfolio, you maybe know them, how they work, their certain style. You learned how to communicate with them based on what they did in their life, what they experienced so far, what they created so far. With Midjourney, that's still a black box to us. So you'll have to figure out and poke at the damn thing to see which prompts result in anything that's usable to you, or anything that you like or appreciate, or anything that's utter trash or doesn't go in the direction you want at all. So at this point, it feels a bit more like what all the professors at university told me, at least, maybe I assume you too. And my respect for these professors back then wasn't very high, because what they used to tell me is that the craft of design does not really matter that much as long as you have got a strong conceptual and strong stylistic drive in you. And back then it always sounded like an excuse for not being able to pull off the craftsmanship part that design still needs, and maybe we can talk about where it goes with that.
Especially in CG, right? Where the craftsman's part of all of this is just huge, because CG, well done, is a lot of effort, involves a lot of computer science.
Yeah, and is rarely seen, actually.
Is rarely seen. So that's true. Now, the computer, not yet, but probably in the future, if we extrapolate from here, where we are now, is probably capable of just taking out the craftsmanship, because you can just tell it what to create and it creates it. Although I have the feeling that there is still some craft involved, and that craft is learning to talk to this machine.
That craft is communication this time, and not necessarily learning or crafting with your tools. But that craft now is actually communication. So it's actually what those professors back then were aiming at.
I'm not totally sure, because you're communicating with the machine anyways. If you're using a standard graphical user interface, say you are using Houdini, and you learn the standard user interface, you're already communicating with the machine.
Right.
You're trying to tell the machine what to do. Now it's a very different approach.
Or on a much lower level, you could say programming is communicating with machine.
Yeah, but in a way that that it's easy for the machine. So the biggest difference, at least as I see it, is that this still is just software. It's just an algorithm that you are using, but they try to create an interface that is not comfortable for the machine, as programming is, but it should be comfortable for us, such that we can express what we have in mind, and then the machine comes up with solutions. At the same time, we have to ask ourselves, where do these solutions come from? So is this machine creative? Can it be creative? Because if I understand this correctly, it learned from images that already exist. So what we see here is just a recombination of input. It might be a very complex recombination, but still, it is nothing new. The question is, what is creativity? Is creativity more than just recombination? I think if you think about it, a human artist probably does pretty much the same. Inspiration means finding sources and recombining them in a special way in your mind, and then coming up with a new idea. And this new idea is sort of an interpretation or recombination, juxtaposition of stuff that you saw before.
Yeah, of your experiences. Most of the time, I think. The point that would come to mind was not only drug-induced art, but alleviating creativity through the use of psychedelics, for example. But then again, you could argue that that is what we've seen with those lower level types of networks, the Google thingy.
I remember that put those eyes everywhere.
That's a difficult one. Another point, I don't want to distract from that discussion. Let's return to it later. But one point that I wanted to make here is that you claim that the Twitter feed of Midjourney, for example, looks a lot like ArtStation. And I'm questioning if that's from the data set it learned from, or if that's from the actual prompts that people try. Because I have the feeling that now, with the craftsmanship of being more communication with the machine and coming up with an idea and communicating that to the machine, it might become obvious how shallow most of the design works and concepts out there are actually that are in existence.
Probably. So maybe let's try something. Let's try something very different. What about I don't know, industrial?
Imagine first.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not even capable of using this very, very simple machine.
It's warm in Germany. We are still slow.
Imagine street, American New Color style.
What's American New Color style? Never heard that.
Photography. American New Color, 70s photography
70s?
Style.
Okay.
So showing the emptiness and the distant environments. Let me show you quickly a Google search about American New Color.
A DuckDuckGo search.
A DuckDuckGo search.
All right, there we got the images.
There we got the images.
And you end up with
that
airplanes.
is not what I meant. That is absolutely not what I meant. No good examples here.
All right.
Let's see what Midjourney is coming up with. So it takes American literally.
Oh yeah, that's very American. But I mean, it's interesting because I would have more described this as American flag, abstract, deconstructed, geometric, op art, something like that. That's more what I would have used to describe.
So what about
like this if I wanted it.
Ansel Adams land?
Imagine
all the people.
Jesus Christ! Let's see if we get copyright struck for that.
Landscape, black, white, moon, hills, photography.
And what in some of the prompts that we've seen from other artists, I think you didn't properly trigger the prompt.
Probably not.
What we've seen from other artists, Midjourney's output, it's very important at some point to also add high detail, 4K, 8K, and Octane render.
Yeah,
some
Octane
weird
render.
reason.
Octane render is not describing a software anymore, but it is describing a visual style.
Which is interesting.
That is funny,
Yeah.
actually.
I mean, you got to get to this point.
Yes.
So it's imagining your Ansel Adams here. Let's just switch over there and see what it hallucinates, this thing. But we're getting carried away. You see, the thing is, this thing is kind of addictive in playing around with it, because it's so easy to just shoot the stuff that's in your mind at it and see if that actually still holds true, if you see some sort of visual with that. And I think that's the immediate, we talked about it, this is the immediate value that you could get out of this, because when you're concepting or when you're exploring a style, coming up with ideas, you usually just write them down and you don't know exactly how and if they work visually. And to just check those ideas, it might be a valuable tool.
I mean, that is very true, because even if this is just recombination, usually you come up with stupid ideas. Like, what if I take an astronaut and make it in the style of, I don't know, put a potato in his hand.
Yeah.
But usually you don't have the time to just
Exactly.
execute this, to evaluate if it works.
Yeah.
And now with a tool like this, you can just see if a combination of stuff leads to something interesting or not. So what if let us upscale one of these.
Okay.
Which one? First one?
I like the first one best.
Upscale, first one. It is probably really a useful tool at its current state for feeding the standard graphics pipeline, like if you are trying to be
mood boarding,
creative.
style framing.
Exactly.
I've seen
instead
lots
of going ArtStation, or instead of going,
or in addition to going ArtStation.
Exactly.
And I've also seen lots of overpaints based on Midjourney artwork, and I think that works really well.
at least it spits out lighting, composition, visual ideas,
Shapes.
shapes.
Yeah.
There used to be a software back in the day. I'm not exactly sure. 17 years or so.
When pixels were still made of wood.
Exactly. Where it created procedurally some black and white forms, and it was advertised as a creativity starter, like just create some forms, like with a Rorschach test.
Yeah.
And then go from there. And that even worked. So for this, I totally get why this is a good idea.
So we're almost done here with upscaling. Okay, so let's just display the full glory of this. Display the original.
Ansel Adams. Well, I think Ansel Adams probably wouldn't be
Wouldn't
too
approve.
glad about this result. The lighting is a little strange, and
It's very painterly, though.
it's painterly, and the shape of the hills is strange too.
Well, I mean, you can. That's the other thing. If you go to the Midjourney website and have a look at the feed, which is ordered by Rising Stars or whatever is popular within the community, and you just go on one of those and have a look at the prompt.
Let's look at this one. This is intriguing.
And wait for a while. Let's see if and when the... Oh, yeah, okay. And you see, this is a long prompt. So, stunning interpretation of Nike shoe sneaker made of petals, advertisement, solar punk, highly detailed and intricate, golden ratio, colorful, hyper maximalist, ornate, luxury, elite, good vibes, oil painting thematic, CG Society, James John, Brian Froud, Ross Tran. And that is what it spit out. And you can also see the parent down here, so from which it evolved, and all the related images it came from or that were generated by this artist. So these are very, very long prompts, and not just like floral Nike sneakers in front of abstract swirly backdrop, as I would have described this.
Yeah. I would like to investigate further how exactly the prompt influences what it creates.
Yeah.
So what if I just skip half of this prompt? Is it totally different what it spits out or not? And then on the other, but it's an interesting combination. That's exactly what we said before. If you have something like this in mind, it was not feasible to test it out
No,
in its
absolutely not.
detailed
No, absolutely not.
detailed appearance like here.
Yeah, or at least not as quickly. I was about to say, but you don't know how many parent generations got into that, and how many hallucinations went into that until we arrived at this state here. So, but it's definitely quicker than starting in 3D, and potentially quicker than painting in Photoshop or Krita or whatever.
Yeah. So Olivier Beaugrand is obviously
very talented at his prompting.
A very talented, I mean, he's a very talented artist.
Yeah, he is.
I know him, and he's creating beautiful artworks for years. But he's very, very talented at prompting too, and that is design. So that brings me to a question about authorship. So, who created this image? Olivier or the machine, or both?
Who created an image when?
Or the artists that fed the algorithm?
Who created an image when you have an art director or creative director at a studio instructing 5 artists?
Exactly, yeah. That's a very important question too.
The only thing is that your artist now again is more your tool. I mean, didn't we have that same discussion when photography arrived? Like, who created that image? Because it's now a machine creating that image.
Oh, absolutely. It's not that I want to decide the question. It's just that we have to ask it.
Yeah.
Do we?
Absolutely. We absolutely have to ask
it. Is that image democracy that is starting now? Or is it just meaning that we don't have any graphics jobs left in 10 years' time?
I'm not sure if we won't have any graphics jobs left in 10 years' time. I'm always, weirdly enough, as pessimistic as I am in lots of aspects, in these tech and design intersection revolutions, I'm always optimistic, because in my opinion, it only takes away the boring aspects of work, the grunt work that often was there. And I think it's democratizing design, absolutely. But also, and that brings me back to you finding out that the Twitter feed looked like ArtStation. It democratized design. But that doesn't mean that you have to have a talented craftsman or craftsperson driving and using the tools. Because again, when you look at these feeds, I think most of the stuff does not necessarily come from the training data, which you can see by Olivier Beaugrand's work, which is really nice, a really nice interpretation of what the machine can do, or a really nice push towards what the machine can do. But most of the stuff you see there is just like really obvious variations and stuff we've seen lots of times, conceptually not very exciting. And a friend of mine developed a very, very good intuition about how to prompt and push Midjourney into directions you wouldn't imagine. She's been amazing at what kind of stuff she creates: abstract art, photorealist art, that wouldn't fit into any of these more, let's call them cliche styles. Mm-hmm. So summing this up, my rambling here is, I think that the job of a designer, as it always was, will change. Lots of the grunt work, especially when it comes to concepting, in the short and midterm will just fall away. Instead, your skills will evolve more into a linguistic perspective, which weirdly enough, it had to be also if you were technically inclined and wanted to program, because programming is logics, math, and linguistics. So the linguistics aspect here gets really important at some point. Not necessarily the craftsmanship of actually laying down pixels.
So you are learning another programming language. It's just a human-centric programming language, in a way.
Exactly. But I mean, if you go through those prompts and compare them to what you want or what the output looks and how you would describe them, intrinsically, there's a difference in what you have to prompt and what it spits out. And I think this learning is very interesting and it's very valuable, I think, because that's the learning curve that I think most successful art directors or creative directors went through, to be able to communicate what they had in their mind to another person.
Yeah, let's see where the software evolves. If it starts to understand us better and better, or if we have to treat it like a, I don't know, neurotic friend or so, where you have to carefully pick your words, otherwise disaster happens. Yeah, let's see. I'm not anxious either. I don't think that designers are doomed or unnecessary anymore. I think as we are humans, and designers usually are there to communicate with other humans, it is very important that this human input still is available. And I don't see why this would ever change, because even if a system like this AI system is capable of creating content in a different way, better, faster, I don't know, it lacks the human perspective. So regarding concepts, I think humans will stay as long as they try to communicate with other humans.
Yeah.
But regarding craftsmanship and learning how to sculpt a donut in Blender, this will change a lot, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the very near future, probably regarding style frames and concepting and finding new ideas.
Yeah.
But in the long run, I'm pretty sure that this will develop into AI deep learning function for rendering first, and
Absolutely.
then you will have tools that will aid you with creating your models, and sooner or later you won't use any polygons anymore to describe your scenes, probably.
Probably not, no. Or probably you will at some point when you want very intricate changes onto something. But
if you want to go vintage.
like analog photography.
Exactly.
Polymodeling will become a hipster thing at some point.
Exactly.
Give it another 20 years.
I think so. Maybe. Nevertheless, it's a very interesting and important development.
I think so.
And we have to keep an eye on it, and we have to stay involved, I think.
Nevertheless, personally, I'm looking forward to at some point getting access to Dall-E or Midjourney, testing that out, see where that whole thing develops here. I mean, it's highly addictive and fun. That as a pastime, for some people, for the non-professionals in here, it might even become the new Bob Ross oil painting, just to relax, meditate in front of a Midjourney prompt.
Oh, absolutely. It's just fun to play with it.
Yeah.
And for the professionals, well, it is...
another tool in your bag that alleviates, at least my perspective. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're right. It's another tool in your bag, but a tool that will be a prerequisite, I think, in 2 years' time or so.
Absolutely.
So you have to use it, because if you use it, you are faster.
Yeah.
And if you are faster, that's
of course,
always economically speaking, always a good thing.
Yeah.
So that, yes. I thought about a new assignment for the university, like
Tell me.
create an artwork using Midjourney, and then until you are satisfied, create something using a prompt, and once it spits out something, recreate it using traditional tools.
Yeah, or I mean, just start them slow, just like overpainting first.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe just idea generation or idea refinement using Midjourney, then overpainting, and then recreating it in 3D until we have an AI that does the rendering in 3D for you as well.
Yeah.
Are we forgetting anything? Are we forgetting anything blatantly obvious here?
No, absolutely. We are. I'm absolutely sure that we are forgetting a lot, but that was our very first look into this, and let's revisit the topic sooner or later.
Yeah, and everyone let us know in the comments what blatant glaring omissions we are making here, what we didn't think of. Let us know your opinion on Midjourney, Dall-E, and this new stage in AI development, how you're going to use it, how you're maybe actually using it currently, and what you see as the chances, dangers, pros, cons. Let us know.
Yeah, would be very interesting.
So, as always, until next time, from our side, it's cheers and goodbye.
Goodbye.